Hi, I'm Greg, aka Vexed, and since I've been getting into watercolor, I've really been wanting to do a stitch piece. So that's what we're going to do here. What you're seeing right now, my little one has stuff to say about this. So what you're seeing right here is the sketch process, and my sketching process is extremely... That's right, dude. It's messy like you. And, so yeah, it's Stitch and Lilo when they're doing the hula dance while her mom's looking for a job. I've only seen the movie a couple times, so I don't remember her name. But so I'm gonna be using kuretake, gansai tambi. I don't know how to pronounce it, but the kuretake watercolor paints on this. It's Artist Loft watercolor paper. It's what I did the Bowser on. You can click the card that's about to pop up. Feels so cheesy to say that. But yeah, and this is also the first time I was using a Copic Multiliner. I love this thing. It's great. It's better than the Pitt Artist pens. As far as feel goes, I'm going to paint it tomorrow because I'm going to let it dry overnight, and we'll see how it does. Alright, so the first thing I decided to do after letting the ink dry overnight was to figure out what colors I was going to use. And I did this on a Canson mixed media sketch pad. I mixed colors together until I found ones I liked, and I turned it into a color chart, trying to indicate how much of what colors I used once I found them, so that if I decided to do Lilo and Stitch again, I could easily just refer back to this if I was using the same paints. Given I'm new to watercolor painting and using pans in general, this whole process went a lot more smooth than I thought it would. And I found my colors fairly quick. I think I can attribute that to my use of colored pencils and just incessantly layering them together to get different colors out of those. It was overall not... I thought it was going to take a lot longer. And in all honesty, I'm not even sure if I'm doing this correctly. I'm not sure about the amount of water I should be using, or even how much of the paint I should be grabbing off of the pan. Kind of just flying by the seat of my pants. Unlike colored pencils, where I watched a lot of stuff on how you should properly be using them, these I haven't. Like I said in the last video, my only real experience with any sort of watercolor are the Arteza real brush pens, and that's a completely different animal than this. It is not the same thing. As far as mixing them and doing this, I found it to be extremely user-friendly. For being the first set of paint pans that I'm using, I really like them so far. So let's get into the art itself. So what I do know about watercolor painting is there's dry on dry and wet on wet, or wet on dry. I know the one, you drop water onto the page and let the page soak it up and stay wet while you add paint to it, and then the other, you just take your paint and apply it to the page. So what I did here, I just took the watered down paint from the palette and then just started applying that directly to the page without putting any water on it prior. And I think towards the end, this is what bit me in the ass when it came to the background, but we'll get into that when I get there. What you see me doing here is kind of how I went through the whole thing, was putting a light wash over everything, then adding more pigment as I wanted to darken stuff up for like shadows and whatnot. I didn't go through it with black for my shadows. I wanted to keep it the picture a little more vibrant, so I didn't really go for that higher contrast. That Copic Multiliner throughout this whole thing held up really well. I didn't notice any smearing or anything like that. I didn't really expect it to. if it did, I would have been disappointed. But I think just because even the pip pens might have held up to it, because I'm not really scraping the page with the brush. It's not as abrasive as, say, an alcohol marker or a colored pencil. So as I go through using that more, I'll keep talking about it and we'll see how it works out over time. But so far, I'm really enjoying it. Let's keep going with the time lapse and see where we end up. So yeah, this was a nice way to find out how to not clean up a mess when you make it, when you drop the brush on the picture. I got distracted by something, went to put the brush down, and I dropped it. So, knee-jerk reaction, I grabbed the cotton swab, wet it, drained some of the water out of it, and I was just going to see if I could dab the paint off the page. Instead, I started scrubbing it. Well, this didn't have the desired effect. Well, it kind of did. It got the paint off, but I also started damaging the surface of the paper. As you can see there, I scraped away some of the ink, so a Copic won't hold up to that, but I'm pretty sure no pen will when you start destroying the tooth of the paper. Later on, I am able to repair that by going over it, but because I started tearing up the tooth of the page and making it kind of fuzzy, I wasn't able to get some of the detail because the ink of the pen started bleeding. And the nice thing was, I didn't let the page dry overnight again. I gave it probably a half hour and started painting again, and the ink didn't smear with that. So it seems to be fairly quick drying, which is pretty cool. Let's keep going, jump forward to the background. Yeah, and so outside of the way I cleaned the page, this is where it really started to get sketchy for me, and I really could have messed this picture up with no recourse other than maybe cutting the characters out and painting a separate background, and like taking a piece of styrofoam and putting it in between the two and putting them on there so they would be like kind of lifted off. That would have been cool. But I started doing the background. I knew I wanted to do sand with like the water kind of off into the horizon and then like a sunset behind them, but I had no idea how to approach it. With markers, I would have had a good idea of how to do it, but not this. And this is where wet on wet probably would have done really well for me. The sand came out okay, in my opinion. I mixed like a yellow and a brown and a white, I think, to get that color. And then I started like washing orange and everything over it because I figured if it was a sunset, it would, kind of change the color of the sand a little bit. And that came out okay. I was happy with that. It was when I started doing the sunset. So I started painting the sun and I decided it was too big. And I made it smaller. And it wasn't quite as round as it was, so I tried to fix that and it got a little smaller. Still wasn't right, so I tried to fix that and then it just kept getting smaller. It was getting a little hairy, so what I went ahead and did was like, okay, well, if I do the colors leading out from the sun into the sky, which is getting like a dark bluish purple, away from the orangey colors, I could use that to blend it all together and try and round it out some. I had a hell of a time blending all that. If I had it done wet on wet, like soaked the whole background and then started putting the paint on it, I probably could have got that soft look that watercolors can have. And I love the texture look of watercolors, but I really wanted the background to be blended. So that's kind of what I learned from this, is to think about like where you want to use your wet on wet, and I think it's wet on dry, or I'd have to look it up, but I got some learning to do. I'm enjoying it, and the more I do it, the more I'll progress. And yeah, so I hope you learned something from this, because I kind of did, I think. Maybe, who knows, we'll see. As long as I don't repeat the same mistakes again. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.